So our first agenda item is fraud trends, which goes hand in hand with types of fraud. Now, there's a lot of fraud schemes out there, so I'm going to focus on the ones that I have seen impact our financial institutions or scams that I anticipate impacting our customers. These trends are what I would call the most common scams we have identified and had reported to us. So before we get into the types of fraud trends we're going to explain different types of fraud. Next slide, please. So the two biggest types of fraud I see, again, excluding debit card fraud, are phishing and social engineering. I know this because the Federal Trade Commission, or FTC, which I may refer to it as, reported consumers lost over $3.3 billion to fraud in 2020. That's up from $1.9 billion in 2019, stated on slide 1. So in New Hampshire during 2020, there were over 7,000 reported fraud incidents, resulting in a loss of over $6.3 million. And these are reports of identity theft, imposter scams, social engineering scams, and more, which we'll get into a little bit further in the presentation. On the left-hand side, we have phishing. Phishing is defined as the fraudulent practice of sending emails purporting to be from reputable companies in order to induce individuals to reveal personal information, such as passwords or credit card numbers. Robocalls fall into this category as well. I'm sure you've all received a phone call about your car's extended warranty. That's a phishing attempt. The scammers are tossing out a hook and hoping that someone bites, which is kind of how it got the name phishing. And phishing attempts can look extremely real. Scammers use a tactic called spoofing. Spoofing allows the scammer to change their email address or their phone number to anything that they want you to see. So they can even make it look like the bank is calling you directly, and it'll even show up on your caller ID as your bank calling you. It is important to remember that the bank will never call you and ask you to verify information. No one here is going to contact you and ask you to verify your debit card number, your online banking username, or any of your personal information, because we already have that in our systems. So phishing often leads to our next type of fraud, being social engineering, and can result in compromised devices, identity theft, financial loss, and much more. Think of phishing as the starting point to getting your information or trust to allow the scammers to complete their scam. Social engineering is defined in the context of information security as the use of deception to manipulate individuals into divulging confidential or personal information that may be used for fraudulent purposes. Social engineering is on the rise because it can result in significant financial gain for the scammer. The reward in these cases often outweighs the risk because tracking down the perpetrators of these scams is nearly impossible. So the victims of these scams often don't recuperate their monies because local law enforcement is unable to track down the perpetrator, most of the time who is outside the country. Recently, I've seen a lot of account takeover scams and refund scams tied to impersonator scams. Scammers have been calling into banks, impersonating their customers. I had a gentleman whose phone was actually being forwarded to the scammers. So when we identify a caller that's calling into the bank and we determine that the person claiming to be John Smith isn't John Smith, my department, being the fraud department, is notified, and we investigate and contact the customer. Because that customer's phone is being forwarded to the scammer, I couldn't get in touch with him. So this scammer even went as far to contact a store that I was speaking with in an attempt to recuperate funds on behalf of this victim, claiming that they worked for the fraud department and actually worked with me. So I ended up calling the scammer and had to clarify with them that I knew that they didn't work with Cody because I was Cody. And it took several attempts for them to actually process the fact that I knew that they didn't work with me. So as a result of this kind of activity, I understand when I call customers that they don't want to verify anything with me. A lot of times they'll even actually hang up on me, and that's actually totally fine by me. I applaud those customers, and I encourage them to contact their main branch that they have a relationship with, so that those employees will verify me and get that customer back in contact with me. But referring back to the slide, we'll go over refund scam, imposter scams, and romance scams in the next couple of slides. But the account takeover scam is something that has impacted many banks in the area because it is usually part of one of those kinds of scams. Not always, but most of the time they typically go hand in hand. Next slide, please. So here we're going to break down the social engineering process into 4 categories. The scams I'm going to discuss have some level of phishing and a lot of social engineering involved to make them successful. This is a chart of the social engineering process starting at reconnaissance. This is where they identify a victim, gather background information, and chart out the process of how they're going to complete their scam. With reconnaissance, they also usually are looking into their victims. So sometimes they utilize Facebook. Facebook does a lot of those quizzes where it asks, what's your dog? What was your first dog's name? What's your favorite color? What's the name of your favorite cousin? Unknowingly answering those questions on Facebook, you're actually giving the answers to security questions for a lot of different platforms. So if you post it online, people can view it and the scammers can use that against you. Next, we have the relationship development. They engage the target and begin to develop a relationship. They spin their story and obtain any missing information that they don't have to complete their scam in an attempt to gather information. So sometimes they may already have the last 4 of your debit card and they need the whole card number. So that would come into play if they're contacting you claiming to be the bank in a hopes that you'll provide that information to them. And they usually build it off of a sense of fear or trust. It can go either way. Next is exploitation. They take control of the interaction and play on the victim's sympathy or fears to get them to do what the scammer or caller wants them to do. And finally, it's execution. From there, they execute their scam and their goal of their scam, usually being stealing money, having you send it via gift cards, wires, cash in an envelope, or they plan on something more complex like stealing your identity.